Happy New Year and welcome back to another episode of Gestatten Sie. My name is Ulrich Eid and every week I speak to all kinds of creatives about their story and whatever they're passionate about. This week was a special episode because I got to talk to New York photographer Jayne Wexler. Jayne is an amazing photographer focusing on portrait photography, and she was the first photographer I actually got to work with myself when I was doing an internship with her back in 2013. In the episode, we talked about her journey from nervously photographing celebrities to publishing impactful books and shooting big advertising projects to connections with subjects and collaborators, how those shaped her career and elevated her work, and the role of personal work, like her return to street photography and how teaching has deepened her understanding of that craft. Thank you very much to the Landesinnung Wien der Berufsfotografie for supporting this project. And now enjoy my conversation with Jayne Wexler. So, hi Jayne. I'm so glad to have you here because I was just thinking about that the other day that I think you were the first photographer I got to work with during my studies. So the first photographer I got to assist and do an internship with. So it's been a long story.
Yes. And I remember you were great and it was a lot of fun. I cannot remember what year it was. We're dating ourselves.
I think it was 2013. So over 10 years. That's crazy. Yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad we've kept in touch. And I'm proud of you for doing this, podcast. And when I see your wonderful photographs, it's great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always really nice to see what you're up to as well. Would you just tell people who you are? Just explain a little bit about yourself. Yeah, where you come from, what you do.
So I now live in upstate New York, but I go between the city, New York City, and upstate New York. I was born in Brooklyn, and I lived there until second grade. That's around 7. And then we moved to the suburbs in New Jersey. And then I went to school in Philadelphia, which was called Philadelphia College of Art. And then it changed to University of the Arts, which sadly just at the beginning of the summer closed with giving people a week notice. And this is an institution in Philadelphia that's been there for years.
That's so unfortunate.
It was very sad. It was just an art school and then it merged with music and dance and theater and it just closed the doors. Really sad.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, I moved back from Philadelphia. And, I traveled in Europe for a few months by myself before looking for a real job. And then I moved to the city, and my first job was working at Macy's. I was nervous about getting a job, and I had an opportunity for an interview. So I did visual merchandising where I would, design the shops and the different departments and the displays. And I did learn about styling, which is important. And to always have odd numbers. You don't want 2 things in a photo. You'd want 3, or in a scene or setting, odd numbers are better sometimes.
Really? Why though? That's super interesting to me.
I don't know. It just works. It works better. Try it. I don't know. I can't say it's always thing, but I remember when we did display cases, they wanted odd numbers. Anyway, that didn't work out very well. And they said to me, you clearly want to be a photographer and not here. And I said, yeah. And they wanted to let me go before they had to pay unemployment. So in America, it's after 6 months. So 5.5 months, I left. Then I hit the streets to find an assisting or studio manager position, which they're not as easy to get these days, full-time positions in studios. So I met with a lot of different people, and I met a woman named Barbara Bordnick, who was very established. She's a portrait and fashion photographer, and I went to work for her, cannot remember how long, 2.5, 3 years. She was a tough cookie. I learned a lot from her, but she could be very difficult. So it was tough, but it was good training. And that's where I learned a lot of business. I learned about production and how to run a studio, how to hire stylists, hair and makeup artists, how to put together a shoot, how to, create backgrounds, and how to do the whole shoot from start to finish. So it was great experience. I left her and I became a freelance photographer. And I think I was a freelancer for about 4 years. And I got to work with different photographers, learning what I want to do and what I don't want to do. I worked for architectural photographers, still life photographers, fashion. It was really great exposure to, get a taste of what was out there. And the business, this was in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. The business was very different then. It was booming. It was, not digital. It was going to the lab, doing clip tests for your shooting chrome film with the Hasselblad or 35 millimeter camera, waiting 3 hours unless you rushed it and got it in an hour and a half to check your exposure and then process it.
Oh, wow.
Really
That sounds very different. Oh, yeah.
Something you probably don't even know about, or I don't know. Did you do much, Bill?
We did learn about film and developing and everything in school,
Right.
But I've not really picked it up after school because it's just pretty expensive. And yeah,
Yes, now
kind
it
of like
is.
the fast-paced shooting style of digital, I guess.
Right. So I started to want to wean off of assisting, and I would assist one guy because he was a still life photographer, Jim Barber. I remember he was a lovely guy. And I always figured if I'm in a still life studio, I'm not going to bump into people who I'm trying to get work from. Because if I was starting to reach out to magazines and to different companies as a portrait photographer, I didn't want to,
When was it clear for you that you wanted to do portrait photography?
In high school, I was on the yearbook committee, and I didn't mention I went to Rhode Island School of Design for one of those pre-college art programs. So I always loved photography and was drawn to people. And I knew I wanted to do something with people. And at first I was trying fashion, and I got into shooting. Well, I can tell you, about my first jobs, but I guess I'm a people person. I was always drawn to people.
Yeah, I mean, knowing you, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you can establish a really amazing connection to pretty much everyone within a couple of minutes and see them in a way not a lot of people can. So that was one thing I was really impressed by while working with you. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, that's nice to hear.
How important was it for you to have this kind of mentorship in the beginning, working with that one photographer and then over the years working with all kinds of different photographers to get to where you wanted to go? Yeah.
I think for me, it was great. And I think it's changing now because I teach, and I can get into that later, but a lot of people don't have the same assisting possibilities or assisting opportunities. And that's where you learn. We learn in school, and in school it was much more of a fine art approach. And I never had a business class in art school. So I had to take some liberal arts, but I never knew about how to do an estimate or, how to get work. We didn't learn that stuff.
Yeah.
So luckily in college, I did do an internship my senior year. I worked for 2 different people, so I got a taste for it. But I think as you learn too, interning, I always say to students, you should intern because that's when you really learn what it's like and get a taste of the real world.
Oh, yeah. It's such a big difference between like just studying at university and then like going out there actually working with other photographers.
Right. Yeah, because when you go straight out and try to, shoot, and a lot of kids are doing this now and some are successful, but they have no idea about how to negotiate, how to produce, how to run a shoot, insurance. There's so many things. So I learned that a lot with Barbara, the first woman I worked for, Barbara Bordnick, and then just being in different studios. I learned how to deal with clients, how you keep quiet on set. If you were an assistant, you don't blurt out, oh, that head isn't going off or that light's not going right. I think you missed that shot, or, you quietly go to, if you're a second assistant, you'd say it to the first assistant, or you whisper to the photographer. So I do think it was very valuable to work for different people.
Yeah.
And did that answer the question? I can't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely does. Was it easy for you to like let that behind and just do photography full time as a freelancer then? Or was that a big step for you?
That is actually a really good question, because a lot of people back when I was doing it were like, oh, I'm tired of assisting and I'm just going to go off and be a photographer. And I transitioned, which I think was great, because, you can't just go get jobs right away. It's not easy. You have to, it takes time. So you need to make a little income in the meantime. And that's why I did work for the still life guy. And I also should mention that I would shoot weddings. And that was great income, because when you're assisting, you're not making as much as full on shooting a wedding. And those were the days when it was film, and I was shooting with a Hasselblad lots of times, and we couldn't see what we were getting during the wedding. It was very scary.
Oh yeah, it sounds very scary.
You didn't know. And I would do some PR events, public relation events, and little things on the side, and start building up. And then, word of mouth, getting to know people. And I met a girl I knew who worked in another studio, said, I have this guy who's a writer. He's a journalist, and he's looking for a photographer. He's working with a magazine. There were some different ones, but Blitz magazine, which was like The Face. Did you know Blitz? It was an English magazine years ago.
I think so. Cool. Yeah.
And I got a call one day. So she said this guy, Stephen Daly, needed someone. And he called me and he's like, I have this woman who's starting out and she needs portraits done for, this magazine. Her name is Queen Latifah. And I'm like, oh, okay. We had no idea, who Latifah was going to become.
Was that like before she actually like started out?
Well, she was starting out, and it's when she didn't have any sense of style. And I had a stylist take her to Macy's, I remember, to go clothes shopping to get clothes. And, she was not used to being in the spotlight. She already had a career going, but not like now, or then. Then I get another call. There's this guy. It's Lisa Bonet's husband, and his name is Lenny Kravitz. And I was more excited that Lisa Bonet, who, do you know who she is?
I don't think so, no.
That's
sure.
She was very famous because she was on a show with Bill Cosby called, I cannot remember. But she was more well-known then, and I remember she called the house when he was at my apartment, and I was more excited that, like, Lisa Bonet called. Anyway, I photographed Lenny Kravitz. I got a great, I had a South African roommate, and she had a beautiful, not a quilt, but a backdrop of all these great faces, a screen-printed backdrop, and I put that up in the bedroom, and I did portraits of Lenny there, and he was fun, and he was over for a while and hanging out. And then another call for a band called Delight. And you might not even know Delight.
I don't think so, no.
In the Groove, or for the listeners, they can look up Delight, but they were very popular. Lady Miss Keir, her name was. And I became friendly with them and, sometimes I'd shoot these people more than once, and get to know them, and went to their loft and, showed them photos, and that was fun. And then one of my first real celebrities, I think, that I shot was...
Those weren't celebrities for you?
They were. But, the most famous person I shot back then was Michael J. Fox.
Oh, wow.
And it was for Dolly magazine and an Australian magazine, another magazine too. I don't remember. And I had a really short window to shoot him. I remember setting up the strobe in the hallway before I went in, and it was another Australian writer who interviewed him, and I could take photos during the interview and then get a little time myself. So that worked out well. And then there's something called, which most of you know, resale. So I would resell the photographs of Michael J. Fox to various magazines because, people wanted photos of them. And then I joined Corbis, which was, Corbis became Getty Images. Mm-hmm. And I would sell stock photography of these known people. So
was it easy for you to just go in there shooting famous people, or were you kind of intimidated or
nervous?
Yeah, nervous. I mean, that's kind of a big start, shooting famous celebrities as a start of your career.
Right. And I was in my 20s, I guess. And it was a little scary. I mean, people like, Lenny Kravitz and Queen Latifah, they weren't as famous at that point, so it wasn't as big a deal. But I remember being nervous because I was shooting David Byrne from the Talking Heads. Mm-hmm. And I shot him twice, actually. But the first time I was shooting him in a friend's studio, lots of times they were not big budgets. This was editorial. So there wasn't a big budget. So I'd borrow a studio and I'd borrow backdrops. Broderson Backdrops was in the same building and they had really nice backdrops. And if I could give them credit, they would let me use their backdrops. Mm-hmm. So that was nice. And I was nervous for David Byrne, but I remember I pushed the buzzer. He was downstairs and I pushed the buzzer and I said, "Who is it?" And he's like, "David Byrne." And he was just he sounded so friendly and nice. I was relieved, and he came in the door and he was really nice. So that went well. I'm not someone who gets all starstruck, but it was cool to meet these people.
I mean, it's kind of a lot of responsibility to take portraits of people that might be used to pro photographers or having a tight schedule and stuff like that. So I guess it's not super easy.
Yeah, no, it was, a little, I was going to say nerve-wracking. I don't know if nerve-wracking is the right word. A little scary, and I wanted to do a great job. And, I was shooting Hasselblad then, so I guess I could see by the Polaroid, because we'd shoot Polaroids first, but it's nothing like digital, we're not tethered. So you never know what would happen. And I guess being a people person, as we talked about, I'm very comfortable with people and I feel like I can talk to them about whatever. And it's up to me to make them feel comfortable so they can express themselves and give me what I'm looking for and make it mutual. I'm very collaborative. So I like to, ask them if there's something they want to try. Or I remember I was in the studio with David Byrne and there were ping pong balls in the studio. And I remember he picked up these ping pong balls and drew eyes on them and put them in front of his eyes. And I have a shot like that. So that was fun. And, I enjoy that.
Have you ever had this openness to other... How do you say that? Openness towards other people, being able to just connect with them on a personal level like that?
with many people. Here's an example. Mariska Hargitay. This is later on. Who is from Law and Order? Do you know who that is? Mariska.
I think so.
Hargitay? Yeah. This show is still on. It's very popular in America. Yeah. It's probably popular all over.
Yeah, I've heard about it for sure. Yeah.
And her mother was Jayne Mansfield, who was a very famous actress, I believe. I don't know that much about Jayne Mansfield, but very famous and known to be like very sexy and, a big star. And Jayne Mansfield spells her name Jayne. So I told Mariska, I'm a Jayne. And then I remember she posted something on Instagram. I don't remember if I posted it or she posted it. I forget, probably me. And she wrote, "To my second favorite Jayne with a Y." So
that's amazing.
Yeah. And I got a lot of hits then. I'm not on Instagram and stuff, but it was a big deal. But I always kind of relate on a human level. I talk about kids. I talk about life. If there's talk about illness, personal experiences that I've had and that they might have had, and just try to connect with people.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important skill a photographer has to have, to just connect with people and make them feel comfortable in the situation you're taking their portrait.
Yeah, it's really up to us. And I've shot some people who were very tough. Like, I did a portrait years ago. Then I can't think of the order of things because I did some fashion, and then I was like, oh, these models are not real and they're a pain in the ass. And, so then I did get a lot into music. I shot Radiohead and Phil Collins, and I'm trying to think of, I did a lot of jazz musicians, Cyrus Chestnut, Jackie Terrison. I could go on. I'm trying to think. But one time I had an assignment I met up with a Japanese journalist, and I photographed a lot of people here in America who were going to have their books published in Japan for a company called Shinchosha. So I shot a lot of great writers for them. I went in a snowstorm up to photograph John Grisham, the Rio Nimoto, the writer, and myself drove up. I don't think I had an assistant. We got to his house in Vermont. We stayed overnight. There was a lot of snow the next morning. We got to his house, and right away he wanted to tell me about how, there's another, I cannot remember who it is, but a woman who was a very famous photographer photographed him, and he was close with her, and, he was very into her photos, and he, didn't open up as much as other people have. And I did get good photos. And then he was making stuffed peppers in the kitchen. So I photographed him while he was cooking and while Rio was interviewing him. And then I had some time with him in another room, but it wasn't as warm as an experience as some, I had the opportunity to photograph Frank McCourt, and I actually shot him twice because then he recommended me to another magazine who needed photos, which was lovely. But he was so genuine and sweet, and I went to his apartment on the Upper West Side, and it was just a great shoot. And I think my assistant and we took him out for lunch afterwards on the Upper West Side, and we sat at a cafe, and he was just lovely. And then there was a story for a magazine about him and his wife, and I went another time and photographed them in Central Park. They live near Central Park, and spent time with them, and he was genuine and lovely. So, it varies.
Oh yeah, I bet. So how was it transitioning more into the advertising world from shooting more celebrities and editorial work?
Right. Well, then it's a very different world. I mean, certain things would stay the same, like I'm a people person and that's how I would connect. But I had a couple different photo reps, and then I had a rep for about 10 years named Kevin Shockett, who, would help get work, or it would be my clients and he would, help negotiate things. And I started to, I should back up because I just remembered, the way I got more advertising work is I was approached by a publishing house to do a book. And they approached me and said, we'd like to do a book on, we didn't know the name at that point, but on mothers and daughters. And we want you to, and I knew the guy, Ken, who is at this publishing house now, because I knew him from when I was an assistant to another photographer for Philadelphia Magazine. And then I started shooting for them later on. And he thought I'd be good to do this book. They wanted to do a book, and they had a writer in mind. And they said, come to Philadelphia, and we want you to go out to lunch with this woman, Lauren Cowan. So Lauren and I went out to lunch to see if we get along, because if you're doing a book together, you're just instant partners, and you're going to be traveling around the country, and, and we knew by the time we got to dessert, and I'm like, oh, can I taste that? Or, I'm picking off her plate or something. Like, we knew we got along, know? So we did a book. It ended up, it was called Daughters and Mothers. And it was a black and white photo essay book. She's a terrific writer. And it was a mix of celebrities and non-celebrities. And for this book, it was up to us to find everyone. And we had 9 months to do this.
Wow.
There's a little history behind this. I'm not going to get into that now, but some other women were going to do the book with them and went to another publishing house for a lot more money. And so that's why they approached us. And we pulled it off. I learned how to contact people. And at that point, we didn't have a book that we had done already to send to them to say, look, this is what we do. Because then we did a second book. And at that point, we had Daughters and Mothers to send to them. And then I did a third book. But we got along great, got some really good people. We managed to get Laura Dern and Diane Ladd and Diane's mother, Lauren's grandmother, on the cover. So that was a big deal. And we also had, I'm trying to think in that book because I get mixed up, Betsy Johnson and her daughter, and Eartha Kitt, who's a singer. I don't know if you know who that is, an old famous singer who would sing at the Carlisle. She was known as the cat lady.
How did you get those people to trust you without having like a book to show them, or
right,
not them knowing you?
We would write letters. Lauren is a really great writer. So we would write letters and explain, and we were trying to get, we were getting interesting stories, and we didn't want a celebrity for celebrity's sake. We wanted someone who really had an interesting connection with their daughter. Some, pull, like Betsy Johnson and her daughter, Lulu, I think her name is. Betsy was more of the crazy wild one, and Lulu calmed her down and was more of the business partner, when Betsy started business. Or, I did a book afterwards called Grandmothers, and I got Alicia Keys and her grandmother, which was great. But at that point, we did have other books to send. They just had to trust us. They knew we were with a good publisher, and we got them to agree.
So the name of the publisher just helped them convince them
no,
to
the
trust
publisher
you?
didn't even, we had the publisher behind us.
Mm-hmm.
We could say it's Running Press, who is a good publisher, but it really was us, Lauren and I, who got these people. The publisher might have helped with a couple. They wanted someone in Canada because they wanted it to, hit the Canadian market. I didn't know about publishing. I didn't know that, the more books you sell or the more they print is the more of a chance, it gives you more of a chance to be on the bestseller list. anyway, we just didn't know that much, but we did it and traveled around the country, low budget once again. I couldn't travel with an assistant. I'd pack my equipment in a suitcase and I'd try to use natural light, but I'd rent equipment from a photographer. I'd get assistance where I was. I couldn't travel with someone, but I learned to call a local photographer or the American Society of Media Photographers, ASMP or APA, the organizations. They might have had different names back then, and find people. And that's how I would get equipment and, learn about locations. Usually we'd shoot them at their home, but not always. And that book ended up being a New York Times bestseller. And it was on the bestseller list for 3 weeks. I had no idea. Someone's like, the publishing house sent us flowers. I was like, is this a big deal? I didn't even know.
That sounds like such an amazing experience to like just be part of that and learn so much from all of that experience, like the whole process and everything.
It was a terrific opportunity. And
was that kind of the jumping block to other bigger projects as well afterwards?
Absolutely. Well, then I should mention, so that started to get me other advertising work. This is the girl who did the best-selling, book, Daughters and Mothers. And then I had those photos or a book to send. And then they made mini books. And, I could send as a promotion, I could send out the mini books, which was lovely. Then we did do the book called Girlfriends. And once again, we had Jennifer Lopez, J-Lo, and her assistant, who was like her best friend. And, we did the book Girlfriends, which did well. It was not a bestseller, but it did well and it got around and it sold a lot of copies. And we also, the publishing company Running Press, or it was another one of their labels who published the book, made these mini books. They're the ones who started those cute little mini books that you see all over now for $5. And well, now they're probably $8, but those did well, and what it was my photographs, and the first book were excerpts from our books in Daughters and Mothers. And then, the first one was excerpts from my book, and they would buy quotes about Daughters and Mothers. They had different quotes in it. And then the second book was quotes from our book. And then a couple of years later, we were approached by a different publishing house, Stewart, Tabori, and Chang in New York, which is a nice publishing house, part of Abrams Publishing. You might not know
sure
there, yeah. But Abrams is a good publishing house. And they approached us, and we came up with Grandmothers. So that was the third photo essay book we did, and that was, as I mentioned, Alicia Keys and her grandmother, and should have had Laura Dern with her grandmother in it, but we had done that already. So anyway, what we were saying earlier, Ulrich, is that these books gave me recognition and gave the client, it helped clients know that I could handle doing these people and these projects. And I remember one of my first advertising jobs was for Bath and Body Works. It was a Mother's Day special, and they wanted to have me photograph some daughters and mothers, and then hang big posters in the stores, for a Mother's Day special. So that was good. And things just developed. You have to promote a lot and really work hard at, trying to get work with advertising. And the advertising world is, well, it has changed now quite a bit, but it is very different than the editorial world. Editorial does not pay much, but you get out there, you usually can do what you want to do, and you have great exposure. Whereas advertising, they want to see that you can do this personal work and this, fun stuff, but then sometimes they're just hiring you to shoot people on a white background. So
Was that a big adjustment for you coming from the kind of creative world of like editorial or portrait photography, going to advertising photography where pretty much everything is laid out and you just have to like shoot specific setups?
It was different. I don't think I had that much trouble adjusting. And honestly, the money was so much better that at that point I was like, okay, I'm going to do this because, you know, I need to make a living, support a family, you know, and so it wasn't that tough for me, but you definitely have a lot more red tape and rules, and you learn that there's a lot of levels. You learn that there's an art buyer, or now they call them art producers, and they're the ones who call in the portfolios and find the photographers. And then the creative team will look at the work, and then they need to meet with their account team, go over budgets, and then the clients have to approve the work. And it's much more of a process. Nothing is just, let me go straight to the subject and talk to them about something, you know? So, you know, they hire you and they want you to do what you do, but then there's a layout and you have to stick to it more. Whenever I would do advertising jobs or whenever I do them, I always try to do a little bit of my own thing. So I'll do what they're asking for, but then I'll take the camera off the tripod and I'll, you know, go to a really narrow depth of field and play around more, different lighting. And sometimes they go for that stuff and sometimes they wouldn't. But, you know, I'd also want to get something from my portfolio.
For sure. I think it's really cool to like just look at your work and also the advertising work and still see something that's true to you. If you still see the person be there and not just a like placeholder, what some advertisings actually kind of feel like. So there's still this personality in there, and that's like really important and really impressive that you still manage to keep that in the picture, even with all the like boundaries that advertising work brings with it.
With all the confines. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I'm fortunate when that works. One thing I should mention is that I ended up getting into a lot of pharmaceutical work, pharmaceutical advertising. And it's a mix of shooting patients, real patients, and then doing a casting for models who are going to act as patients. And there's challenges with both. But when you do shoot real people, real patients, it's much more difficult because they are not used to being in front of the camera. And then it's really up to me to relate to them, to once again, warm them up, get them to feel comfortable. And I can mention that I have a lot of personal experience with this because I had a son when I was a little bit older, and he ended up getting sick, and I dealt with being in the hospital, and I learned a lot about being a patient, being a caregiver. And then later on, well, there's always been illness and then more illness later on. So that I think the clients or the ad agencies, I would mention it because, well, I'm not a shy person, you can tell. And I do think that it makes a difference with, you know, how I can relate to people, that I can really talk to these patients because my son has been a patient. So that really helped with the pharmaceutical.
I bet there. It's really important for subjects or like models as well to have the feeling of being understood and seen. And I feel like if you have made or had the experience yourself, you could actually make them believe you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Make them more comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of like not spending too much time in the advertising world because your main focus right now, I feel like, is just doing street photography, which kind of brings you back to where you started off with I feel like just spending time outdoors, talking to people, like learning about them, telling stories. When did that kind of come about?
Well, what happened was, I think 8 or 9 years ago, I started to teach at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. And that class that I teach every spring is Professional Procedures, Contemporary Trends. So it is teaching their sophomore students, because some of them are graduating and some are going on for a Bachelor of Fine Arts. And some are serious and some aren't. But it's teaching them about the real world and how to prepare, the stuff that I never had in college and a lot of people don't get in school. So I continue, to teach that. The advertising world has changed quite a bit, and I don't shoot much video. I have shot video. I can be a DP and have a camera person, but I haven't ever really put together reels, which is something I should have done, and now I kind of feel like it's a little bit late. It's never too late, but I don't know if I have the wherewithal to do it, and I really prefer photography to video, although if it's patient stories, or I feel like I can do that. But
oh yeah, for sure.
Moving on, then I sent a proposal to the School International Center of Photography, which is a really renowned photo school in New York City. And actually, they have remote classes, so people from all over the world can attend the remote classes. That was a little bit more during COVID. But I did get back to my roots of shooting street photography. All along, I did always take my camera out, always. And when I had portrait assignments, I'd want to take people outside and make it real. Find cool backgrounds, interesting locations was all really important to me. And I started to teach, I have one class called Taking It to the Streets, Impromptu Portraits. That's one class. And the other one I teach is Urban Photography, Finding Your Point of View. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually working on a proposal right now for another class that would be maybe in the parks and concrete, or I forget what I'm calling it, concrete something. I'm working on.
Yeah.
I'm working on a title. But my love of street photography has always been there, and it probably started back in Philadelphia when I was in college. And I remember my senior year, I would take the 4x5 camera into the park and I got to know all the people there and would photograph I'd photograph a lot of older people on park benches and get to know their stories and go to their homes occasionally, and have a rapport with these people. So I've always loved doing this. And in the city where I live, I live in two places. I'm in New York City and in upstate New York now. And in the city, when I'm there, I love to go I'm in an area we call Nolita, north of Little Italy, or it's right next to Soho and near the Lower East Side. And I just love going out and meeting people and talking to them, hearing their stories, shooting them. There are so many different types of street photography, but for me, I do sometimes just capture a moment, and they don't know about it. And I, grab a shot or, catch a scene. But the other part of street photography with me is getting to know the people and going up to them in the park and hearing their story. And sometimes right away I'll say, can I take your photographs and your photograph? And other times, I talk to them for a while and then say, oh, can I do a portrait of you? And so these classes that I've been teaching I love them. They've been very successful, and the difference of continuing education, or now they're calling it open education at ICP, compared to kids who are in college who don't all want to be there. You would hope they want to be there, but, some of them are really into it and some just are lazy. I'm sorry, but this
well, that's what it is. Like,
oh my God. I just can't believe it. So like the ones who are in my FIT class who really want to be photographers and learn about, how to get a job and how to do an estimate and promote themselves, they all, do great and are really into it. But at ICP, people are, paying to take this class and they want to get as much out of it. So we go to different neighborhoods and I help them try to get comfortable approaching people. And this is where they're all like, oh, I really have a problem with this. So I will find someone and I'll go up to them and start talking. And then I'll say, oh, I'm teaching a class and can they photograph you? And the one thing I don't like is when everyone wants to shoot the same thing. I'm like, no, that's not cool. Let's do this and let's do something else. Yeah. But I just love shooting in different environments. And I was in Amsterdam and London recently. And I feel like I didn't really get any shots that I like. And
why was that?
I think it's because I was with my mother and sister. We ended up getting COVID. That could be part of it. I didn't have that much time myself to just go out and go around and go to a neighborhood and really, you have to spend time. And on this trip, it was just too fast. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I don't have many photos that, I love from there. But, if I went back, I just need more time because you need to spend time. And listen, on a weekend workshop in a day or in 2 days, I say to the students, if you get 1 or 3 images that you love, then that's terrific.
That's amazing.
The way.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You do a shoot. If you get 1 or 2 photos that are winners, that's terrific. So you don't get it all the time.
Oh, yeah. How do you teach curiosity? Because I feel like with your work, that's the main thing when taking portraits of just strangers on the street, isn't it?
Well, what do you mean, the curiosity? How?
Isn't it that the most important thing, to just be curious about people, talking to them, learning about them, being open and interested in them?
Absolutely.
And how do you teach that
in
a workshop?
Teach that?
Yeah. Or can you teach it?
Can you teach it? It's a challenge, but I'd say number one is it's in your attitude. It's how you act. It's how comfortable you are. I know some students will shoot down by the hip, shoot from the hip. And some will get great photos and some don't want to approach people, and that's fine. But I try to, maybe I'll see someone who looks interesting and I'll say, why don't you approach that person? They look cool. You're 90% of the time you get a yes. There will be no's. But I said, there's nothing to lose by trying. So I just try to encourage people to go up to someone and when you talk to them, don't always get the camera in their face right away. You can start with a compliment or those are really cool. I love your glasses. I remember a Japanese mother and son recently at a skateboard park with the class, and she had on these really cool glasses in the park. And we ended up talking to them, and their daughter was a skateboarder and she was out there skateboarding. We all thought she had very long hair and we thought she was a boy, but she was a girl. They said, oh no, our daughter. And it was just funny because the whole class didn't know. But she was adorable and was into it. Some people are just so into it. They love it. And you don't know that until you approach them. Mm-hmm. They will ham it up. And then there is something about breaking that moment. If you see something really spectacular, you want to catch it without ruining the moment, So sometimes I might shoot something when they're not looking or they don't notice, but then I'll go up to them. And in the beginning, it will be stiffer.
Mm-hmm.
By spending a little time and talking to them and making them laugh, or if it was like 3 girlfriends recently at NYU in Washington Square Park, I said, ignore me, you guys talk amongst yourselves, and, or get on a subject of something and then get them going and interested in each other and kind of forgetting that I'm there. They know I'm there, but, it varies.
Still, yeah. Yeah, making them feel comfortable to just be themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
How do you just, or is your approach to tell the person's story in those pictures, or just take a genuine picture of them? What do you want to tell by taking their picture?
Good question. I want there to be a little mystery. I'd like people to be able to look at the photo and think about it and wonder, what's going on with these people? What are these people thinking? Why are they together? This is a strange couple. Or, just looking at the details and wondering, the viewer trying to figure out, like, what's going on in their lives, or, are they happy? Are they depressed? Are they, to pull the emotions out of them and hopefully capture the spontaneity and what they are thinking or what they're doing or who they are.
That's beautiful.
Some it will be more obvious and some it won't,
Yeah. Has teaching photography changed you as a photographer, you think?
Yeah, I think I do look at it differently. All these years, I've always taught workshops. So I've taught in various places and, or I used to teach at my old school, University of the Arts. And I learn and I get inspired from the students. So that has taught me a lot. And I guess I do think of things a little differently about how the people would take this, or being empathetic to people. But as I mentioned, I think I'm always in tune with the people I'm shooting and what they're doing. And I know, like, when I have a big shoot in an advertising shoot and I have a producer, I work with Susan Shaughnessy, who's a terrific producer, but I get, well, with my ADHD, a little bit, I'm all over the place. So I tend to be concerned with, what are they wearing and how's the makeup doing and this and that. And so I get involved in a lot of different things, and I need to pull myself back and be on set and, like, worry about the lighting and not get so involved in all the minutia, but I tend to do that. So I have to be reeled in and, concentrate.
Oh, yeah. All right. We kind of have to get to an end slowly, even though I feel like we could talk on forever, but to keep it, not drag it on for too long.
Like, what am I going to talk about? But here we are,
We could probably go for way longer. So to wrap up, I have the same 3 questions all the time. The first one, do you think the creative industry has a problem with sexism?
I think it used to be more when I was younger, and, there weren't as many female photographers, and I think they didn't think the women could handle it as much as, like, a male photographer who could, do it. I think it's still around, but it's gotten better. You're always going to find it, and it depends upon who the client is. I would like to think it's going to keep getting better and better and, not be there. But there's still, in general, are more male photographers. And it's a hard one.
Oh, yeah. That's why I tried to bring it up.
Yeah.
All right. The last 2 questions. One topic you're kind of struggling with in your creative work, and one topic that fascinates you in your creative work.
So a topic that I'm struggling with a little bit is now that I live upstate, I'm trying to think of a personal project. I think it's essential that we always have personal projects going on. And I've been doing some things at community farms. I shot for like a pot farm, trying to help them promote, and, a garlic planting. So, that could be a story, but, these days we need to have diversity, inclusion. So I'm always sort of torn with what can I do to incorporate all these things? And then I sometimes am at a loss. But the other thing is, and this is, I'm sorry, I know our time is limited, but this is just something I want to say. When you get involved, when you have a family and children and a husband, and there are things in life that go on, as I've mentioned, I've had illness issues, and my husband recently broke his hip. The dog pulled him down, so he's moving slowly. So it's always been tough for me to juggle, my photography and personal work and caregiving. And it really is always a struggle, because I want to keep doing my photography. I want to keep working on my website. I want to promote. There's always so much hanging over my head. And, I never feel like I get enough done in a day. And I know I get stuff done, but I really, when students are young and people are young, just take advantage, because you're not going to have like all these responsibilities. And the more and more responsibilities we get, the harder it is. So I always say, just try to take advantage and try to shoot as much as you can.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And one thing that you're currently fascinated in your like creative work?
I'm fascinated with a particular couple that I shot. I mean, it's not a big general thing, but I'm fascinated by this couple who live up here, who live in the woods and basically have bears as their pets. And I'm serious. So never gone there when the bears
crazy. Are. All right.
The bears, she feeds them. And they come around, and she's shown me videos, and she's working on a book now. And so I guess I'm fascinated by the different types of people upstate. And I'd like this to be a project. I'd like to learn more about people who are doing like weird, unique things, So
that sounds really, really fascinating. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's wild. She's this woman who's an artist, and the main thing is that they live in a container home. And they have like 6 containers on their property. And she met this guy when she was older, and they're madly in love. And they have all this machinery. And I'll share the photos with you.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, please do. Well, Jayne, thank you so much for talking to me. It was really nice having you here with me, especially as I said in the beginning, you were kind of the first photographer I got to work with and like learn from. So it's been a really big pleasure.
And it's always been a pleasure being with you and seeing you. And I wish you luck with everything.
Thank you. All right. Thanks and bye.
Bye.
Yeah, this was the first episode of 2025. It was a very fun and special one for me to have. So thank you very much to Jayne for having this conversation with me. At the end, as always, thank you very much to Male Kolumna for the cool cover art and Belinda Thaler for the jingle. All right, see you next time. Bye.